What's the difference between working at Deloitte and working at KPMG? You'll find out after watching this video. Both Deloitte and KPMG are part of an elite group known as the Big Four. The Big Four gets its name because they're the four largest companies in the world within the professional services space. And Deloitte and KPMG happen to be the largest and the smallest of the Big Four. The other two members of the Big Four are EY and PwC. If you're interested in learning more about EY and PwC and the Big Four as a whole, I do have separate videos covering that. But in this video, we'll be focusing on Deloitte and KPMG. Let's start by talking about how did KPMG and Deloitte come to be where they are today, so you can understand their history, and then we can talk about the similarities between them, and then the differences between working at the firms, and ultimately you'll know which one is actually the right firm for you to work at. We'll start with Deloitte, which is older than KPMG and actually the oldest of the Big Four, having been found in 1845. And in addition to being the oldest, is also the largest of the Big Four in terms of employee count, in terms of global presence, and in terms of revenue. Last year, Deloitte employed over 450,000 employees in over 700 office locations across 150 countries and territories. And it made $65 billion. 45% of that revenue actually came from its consulting and advisory services. And to get to that $65 billion in revenue, Deloitte works with a variety of clients, including consumer goods companies like Procter & Gamble, to investment banks like Morgan Stanley, to aerospace companies like Boeing. We'll talk more about the work that Deloitte does and what kind of work you can expect if you work at Deloitte. But before we talk about what it's like to work at Deloitte, let's examine KPMG. So KPMG in its current form was established in 1987 after a merger of two companies that bear the letters of its initials today. And even though it's the smallest of the Big Four, small, I wouldn't want you to think that it's some tiny company across the corner, because globally, KPMG employs over 270,000 people across 600 office locations in 150 countries and territories. Last year, KPMG made $36 billion, most of it coming from its consulting, advisory, and auditing services. And to put that in perspective, even though KPMG is the smallest of the Big Four, its total revenue is greater than that of McKinsey, Bain, and Boston Consulting Group all combined. So even though it's the smallest of the Big Four, it is still a Big Four. And to get to that revenue, it works with clients very similar to Deloitte in various spaces. For example, it has consumer goods companies such as PepsiCo, it works with financial institutions such as the Citigroup, and it even works with pharmaceutical companies like Pfizer. So now that you know how KPMG and Deloitte came to be where they are, you'll notice that there is a lot of similarities between them. First off, the fact that they're both a Big Four company means that their reputation and their global presence are well known. That means that having either Deloitte or KPMG on your resume already sets up and potentially could change your career and also your life. And getting into one of these firms, you're going to be part of their talent development process, which is known for some of the best talent in the world. In fact, if you go to Glassdoor, one of the things that people talk about is the professional development that they get when they work at Deloitte or they work at KPMG. So you're going to get that professional development, you get that mentorship, you're going to get that skill set that you're going to get to build over the time that you're at the firms. And that's because for each of the firms, people are its resources, because as a result, they want to invest in you as much as possible. So you can expect amazing talent development when you get there, both formally and informally. And work-life balance is also similar as well. Typically, you can expect about 40 to 55 hours a week on average, but it really depends on the project that you're working on at Deloitte or KPMG. So for example, if you're working on a project that has a 6-week window and you're working with a new client and a new leadership team, that's probably going to be higher hours than if you're working on a 6-month project that the firm has done over and over again and the client is used to working with the firm. So just keep that in mind, that while 40 hours to 55 hours can be average, sometimes you might get hours that are higher than 70 hours. So one thing that's similar is that if you are trying to pursue a career either at Deloitte or KPMG, just keep in mind that if work-life balance is the number one thing that's important to you, there are better options out there that will give you more stability and closer 40-hour work weeks than working in KPMG or Deloitte. So just keep that in mind. And part of the reason why your work-life balance can vary depending on project to project or week to week is that both firms may require you to travel depending on the project you're working on and the client. So for example, even if you might be working at Deloitte in the San Francisco office, if your client happens to be in Seattle or happens to be in Austin, you might be required to travel there. Same goes for KPMG. Just keep that in mind, is that travel is a part of it. Depends on the project that you're working on and the case, but just keep in mind that you'll be traveling. But the combination of professional development, the travel, and the type of work that you're doing produces amazing alumni who come out of it, including your future self. But you don't take my word for it. If you look at some of the alumni that come from Deloitte produces everyone from CEOs to politicians to famous actors. KPMG also has an impressive alumni roster. So everyone from CEOs of companies to entrepreneurs. So just keep in mind that regardless of the firm that you're working at, all the things that I mentioned earlier are going to come in and you're going to get to tap into this wide network of impressive alumni. But before you can get the benefits of it, you have to actually be able to get the job. And luckily though, if you're considering applying for Deloitte or KPMG, the recruitment process is actually quite similar. So if you're considering applying to Deloitte or KPMG, you might as well apply for the other if you're thinking about having having optionality. I actually have other videos covering each of the steps separately for each of the firms, like for example, how the Deloitte recruitment process works or how the KPMG recruitment process works. But at a very high level, there will be 3 processes you have to go to. First is you have to apply to the firm online. Second, you'll be asked to take a series of online assessments. And then finally, you'll have live interviews. Again, I cover these in different videos, so I won't go to it here. But if you are curious about it, you can actually just search the library, or if you comment below KPMG or Deloitte, I'll link you to it. And once you're in the firm, the promotion path is actually quite similar. So if you decide to start at Deloitte and a friend starts at KPMG, you'll both progress very similarly, assuming that you're doing a good job. At Deloitte, if you just finish your undergrad, you'll start off as an analyst, work your way up to consultant, then become a senior consultant, then a manager, then a senior manager, and then finally a principal director partner. At KPMG, if you're an undergrad, you'll also start off as an analyst. You'll work your way up to an associate, then a consultant, then a manager, then a director, and then finally a partner. So now you know there's a lot of similarities between working at Deloitte and KPMG. So what's actually the difference between working at them? So when it comes to working at Deloitte and KPMG and thinking about what's the difference, there's really 4 differences I want you to be aware of. Their distinctive focus areas, their exit opportunities, their compensation, and their company culture. So let's talk about each. First off is the distinctive focus. So there's a lot of similarities between working at Deloitte and working at KPMG. For example, both sides will do consulting, but there is a slight difference between certain areas that they're known for. Compared to KPMG, Deloitte has a bigger emphasis on its technology practice as well as its implementation practice. While KPMG, compared to Deloitte, there's a bigger emphasis on its digital transformation practice. So just something to keep in mind is that if you're thinking about going to one of these areas, consider that as an advantage. And we'll talk about that in a bit, because when there's distinctive areas of focuses, it also impacts the second difference between them, which is exit opportunities. That is, what opportunities are open to you after you've worked at the firms. So you're thinking about working at a Fortune 500 company, an established company, or even a startup. There's a lot of similarities between the two. So there's not much difference there generally, but there are some slight differences. So if you're thinking about these particular differences, they might make a difference in your career depending on what you're trying to do after Deloitte or after KPMG. So let me highlight what those differences are. I spent over 50 hours looking through a LinkedIn profile to doing analysis to figure out what are the differences. And this is what I found. Compared to their KPMG colleagues, I found that Deloitte alumni tended to go into private equity, venture capital, and strategy and operations roles a lot more than KPMG alumni. Now, on the opposite side, KPMG, I realized, go a lot more into certain finance roles, especially mergers and acquisitions, and also business transformation roles. Not a surprise given their areas of distinct focus, but really important for you to know, if you're thinking about going to one of these roles, it helps you to think ahead. And we'll talk about more about that in the video. Third is compensation. While compensation will depend on your location, your role, your tenure, what I found is that across the board for similar roles in similar locations, that Deloitte actually pays on average 13% more. After you reach that Deloitte level, it really depends on your performance, how many clients you are able to work with, and so forth. And finally, the difference there is the working culture. So if I've had the privilege of talking to Deloitte and KPMG alumni and employees, and at this point, I probably spent hundreds of hours going, meeting them, talking to them, and also going through Glassdoor reviews. There's a lot of similarities. Both firms are known for being inclusive, being diverse, and fostering a collaborative environment. But there is some slight differences, and these differences will make a difference in your day-to-day. The biggest difference I've noticed after talking to hundreds of alumni and employees at Deloitte and also KPMG is that Deloitte has a faster pace of working culture. That means more travel on average and higher working hours compared to any of the big four. And KPMG, on the other hand, is actually quite the opposite. Even though it's a big four that's producing great results for clients, there's a large emphasis internally for KPMG to retain its employees and to think about work-life balance and employee wellness. So there's a lot of focus and active measuring of work-life balance, hours at the client site, and so forth. So KPMG invests a lot more into long-term sustainability. So you can imagine then there's a pros and cons of that. At Deloitte, because you're working on a lot more projects, you're working at a faster pace, you're going to learn a lot more. But at KPMG, you're going to be a lot more sustainable long term. I notice this as well. Whenever I host dinners with KPMG and Deloitte consultants and so forth, I realize that most of the time, if I think about who's going to cancel last minute or who's going to be late last minute, a lot of it is the Deloitte consultants. Versus the KPMG, I rarely, on average, get anyone canceling last minute because of work or someone coming late. So I've noticed that both interviewing people who work at the firms, going through reviews, but also just from my own personal experience as well. So that means that if work-life balance is really important to you while you still want to work at a big four, KPMG might be the better fit for you. But if work-life balance is not important and you want to maximize learning, Deloitte is probably going to be the better fit for you. So that at a high level is how you should think about it. Are there other things that you should think about when deciding, well, let's say that you have a Deloitte job offer and a KPMG job offer, or maybe you're considering applying to either one of them. Which one is the better fit for you? So over the years, I've been lucky enough to be able to mentor a lot of aspiring consultants who end up getting offers both at Deloitte and KPMG. And this is a question that they often ask is, and the thing that I tell them is to think about this question, which is, what do you want to do after working at Deloitte or after KPMG? If there's a certain industry that you know you want to focus on. So for example, if you know you want to be in business transformation and digital transformation, then KPMG is going to be the better winner for you. But if you want to be more on the implementation side or work with technology, Deloitte on average has a better reputation for that. So really think about what industry you want to focus on afterwards. But let's imagine, for example, that you don't know what you want to do, or you want to make a career change, or you just want to be able to become a generalist. Let's say both will give you a generalist offer. Then which one should you choose? In that case, it totally comes down to the differences between them. And in fact, it comes down to what we just talked about, which is the work culture. I would think about, who do you vibe with more? When you were going through the recruitment process at Deloitte and at KPMG, who did you actually enjoy talking with? Who did you want to spend more time with? The reason being is that if you're going to spend a lot of your working day with the people at the firms, you want to make sure that they're people you actually want to spend time with and you feel like you're going to learn and grow. Because I've seen so many people make this mistake where they think, I am going to prioritize learning, I'm going to go to Deloitte, and then you realize they never enjoyed the people they talked to at Deloitte. And when they get there, they just want to do the minimum and then go home because they don't want to talk to the people at Deloitte. And I've heard the same as well as for KPMG, but it really comes down to this, which is, if you don't know what you want to do long term, or it doesn't matter quite yet for you, really think about the culture. So even though in this video I talked about the high level culture can come down to two things. It can come down to the office location you're at and the team that you're at. So really get down to the lowest level that you can, especially once you get the offer. You'll have a chance to meet with the people who work on that team. So take advantage, spend time with them, ask them questions, and think about, well, if I had to spend most of my day for the next few years with these people, who do I want to spend time with? So now that you know about the similarities and differences between Deloitte and KPMG, I'm curious, which of the two firms are you more interested in? Is it Deloitte or is it KPMG? In fact, if you comment below which of the two firms you're more interested in, I'll actually share with you some resources on how to land interviews at these firms and how to prepare for the interviews, depending on the firm that you are applying to and even the city you're applying to. So for example, if you put Deloitte, New York, I'll send you some resources on how to land an offer at Deloitte, New York. And if you're 100% serious about pursuing a career in consulting at Deloitte, KPMG, or another consulting firm, I'd love to help you even more. Here at My Consulting Offer, we're a team of former recruiters, interviewers, and consultants, and we created a free training laying out our secrets about how we've helped over 800 people land their interviews and offers at firms like Deloitte and KPMG. And we're giving this training away for free. So in fact, all you have to do to access the free training is to click the link below, and you'll be one step closer to getting your consulting offer. But you don't have to take my word for it. Actually hear from someone who went through the training. Hear from Emmanuel. Emmanuel actually landed an offer at Deloitte, but when he started working with us, he didn't know how to network or how to even do a case interview. And going through the training was the first start of him landing his offer at Deloitte. I'll link to Emmanuel's video next to my head and also the free training below this video as well. So I'm excited whichever path you take and to help you get closer to landing that offer. All right, I'll see you in the next video.